Hello everybody and welcome to Car Confections. Sitting behind me is the all-new Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid, and we're going for a real-world range test today. Now, before we head out on the road for this real-world range test, let's first talk about a little bit of the basic specifications. So this is a all-new product from Mazda, and it does have an all-new plug-in hybrid system. This is combining a 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine with a 17.8 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. That's going to make a total system horsepower of 323 horsepower. Now the plug is going to be back here in the rear of the vehicle. It's under a quite large cover. And like I said, you have that 17.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's going to be EPA rated for 26 miles of pure electric range. And that's what we're going to test out today. So what's unique about this test is that we call this the real world test, because unlike some of other channels you may have seen on YouTube, we're not just going to plow down the interstate at 70 miles an hour. We're going to put this through 4 distinct sections of driving: city, highway, interstate, and stop and go, to simulate that everyday driving that you might do if you're going to work, doing something out in the city. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into that and see if it actually achieves 26 miles of pure electric range. All right, so we've started out on our range test to see just how far this Mazda CX-90 plug-in will go in the real world. But before we really get started here, I do want to talk about the rules that we're using, the parameters for this test, because of course, if you're not consistent with it, that doesn't tell you much of anything, now does it? So we do have 4 basic rules with all of our range tests. We're going to follow the speed limit on the roads that we're on. We're not going to do super hard acceleration, so about 50% acceleration, unless we're in a dangerous situation and have to
whatever keeps
more.
Up with traffic.
Typically just keeping up with the flow of traffic. Additionally, we are going to be in the Eco drive mode, which in this vehicle is the EV drive mode.
Right, and that's going to lock this vehicle exclusively into electric power. I did test this out. You can floor it, whatever you need to do, and it is not going to turn the engine on at any point during this test.
Right. We're also going to leave the climate control set into automatic mode at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's pretty much it. We're going to follow a designated loop here that comprises about 50% city driving and 50% highway driving. We specially designed this loop. It's about 32 miles. And we're going to see if this Mazda CX-90 outperforms in that 50-50 city and highway drive. Right now we are in section 1 of our driving, which is the city loop. So in this section, it's going to be pretty much like stop and go, 0 to about 45 miles an hour, and then hitting red lights and those types of things that we see in an average suburb here in the United States. And then we'll get to the highway section, the interstate section, and then stop and go traffic section.
Now, like we mentioned on the outside, the EPA rates this at 26 miles of pure electric range. We did a full charge, and the Mazda was actually telling us it has 27 miles of pure electric range. So, we got that extra mile to play with, perhaps. We'll see how it goes through this test, but so far we've been 1.4 miles, and we have gone down to 26 miles of range. Now, the way this plug-in hybrid is set up, this is one of the few vehicles that are hybrid systems that actually has a traditional transmission. So you will, even in pure electric mode, feel this shift through the gears in the transmission, which is a unique feeling.
Alrighty, so we are heading into the end of our first checkpoint. We've concluded the city part of our drive, and we are now heading into the interstate section of our drive. So we pretty much sectioned these off to be about 10 miles each, and we're just a little piece away from the official end of our checkpoint. All right, and that's the end of our city section. Drew, how far have we gone?
12.3 miles.
All right, so we've driven 12.3 miles in our city section, and
since Mazda, of course, I guess designed the CX-90 with a plug-in hybrid in mind, they do have very useful electric vehicle information on here, such as the efficiency, the miles per kilowatt hour, and we're sitting at an average efficiency so far of 2.3 miles per kilowatt hour. So that's very helpful information, especially if you have an EV or a plug-in hybrid. So I really like that Mazda is including that on this model. And as far as how much projected range Mazda says that we have left, we have 18 miles of range left. And what does that mean? Well, that means since we've gone 12.3 miles and Mazda's projecting 18 miles of projected range left, that means our potential range is sitting around 30 miles on a full charge. So we are outperforming what the EPA has stated for the CX-90 so far. Now, we are now on the interstate part of our drive, which is typically where vehicles start to lose some efficiency. If you're familiar with electric vehicles, they actually are a lot more efficient in the city and can get better efficiency there as opposed to just going 75 down an interstate. But we know realistically a lot of you guys will be traveling on the interstate on your daily commute, so we have to include that in this real world test. So that's what we're going to be doing right now.
Now, it's a little bit of a side note from the range test, but as far as out here on the highway, of course, you got a nice adaptive cruise control system, which helps you out. Pretty comfortable in here as well, and it sounds very quiet.
Yeah, I mean, this is a family 3-row after all, so I mean, it needs to be comfortable, and the CX-90 really does excel on that. And if you're curious as to all the specs and figures about the CX-90, we have a full review on the channel. This is specifically focused as a range test to figure out how much that plug-in hybrid can go and how far it can go, but all the specs and figures and all that, that's already on our channel, so you can go ahead and check that out with a link in the description. All right, and we have concluded the interstate section of our drive. So let's go ahead and do checkpoint number 2. Now, if you see me play on my phone, it's not because I'm, just trying to text or something while shooting a video. I'm writing all these numbers down so we can make sure we have all of that completely accurate for you guys. So the trip so far, we've gone 23.8 miles. As far as the efficiency, what are we sitting at, Drew?
2.4 miles per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting, guys. On our interstate section, the efficiency actually went up. I don't know if we've seen that before on any of our range tests.
That is weird,
but that is a little weird that in this Mazda CX-90, the efficiency went up. Granted, it was only 1/10 of a mile per kilowatt hour, but it did go up during the interstate section, which is quite interesting. Now, we have 8 miles of projected range left, and we've driven 23.8 miles, so that means that we're sitting at about 31 miles of potential range, which is still very much outpacing what the EPA said at 26 miles of range is what their rating is, and then we had 27 miles when we charged it to 100% according to Mazda, so it seems to be outpacing both of those figures. And entering on to the highway section, this is section 3 of our real world range test. What this is kind of focused on is a lower speed limit, but still a highway setting. This road has a 55 mile an hour speed limit, so instead of 70 like on the interstate, we're going to be going 55 miles per hour. Well, guys, we're still in the highway section, so part 3 of our drive, but we're down to 2 miles of projected range left. So we wanted to go ahead and fire the cameras back up to see when this vehicle actually drops down to 0 range left and kicks the gas engine on. It probably won't be long from now, but we're already sitting at 29.9 miles on our trip so far, so it's already outperformed the EPA estimate by 3 or 4 miles at this point. So certainly very impressive for Mazda already, but we're gonna see how long this last 2 miles takes to deplete itself. It always seems like it's a long 2 miles when it gets down to the last little bit.
It also depends on how they calculate it as well, because the Volvo mile 0 was a mile itself, so
right. versus where some of the other ones, when it hits 0, the engine's back on. So we'll see how it goes.
We're at 1 right now.
We're at 1.
So it won't be long. All right. It now has just dashes. EV mode canceled. All right.
All right, and the gasoline engine is on. So we are officially finished. Take that picture there, Mace.
31.1 miles is how far we went with this Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid and the Car Confections real-world test. We didn't quite get to go to the stop-and-go section of our drive because that's a little bit further on in our drive, but 31.1 miles. Very impressive, Drew.
Yeah, not bad. Like you said, overperforming. That's what have the important takeaway. And we were, on the interstate. We went through all the different scenarios as well. We have the climate control. And by the way, it is a hot day.
Yep.
We've been cooking at about 94 degrees, it looks like. So the climate is working amply. Those are all factors to keep in mind. And I think when you consider all of that, to see that overperformance is pretty impressive.
All right, and as far as the efficiency that we're getting for this CX90, now the vehicle says 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour is the efficiency that we got during our range test. Now, the interesting thing about this is that when I actually went in to do the math on this, 31.1 miles is how far we drove. This thing has a 17.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. That would be an average efficiency actually of 1.74 miles per kilowatt hour. Now, reasons why we might see some level of discrepancy here could be that the usable capacity is not quite the full 17.8 kilowatt hours, or that there is some level of battery degradation going on. This vehicle does have about, I believe it has 8,000 miles on this press vehicle that we have with us today.
You wouldn't really expect to see that at that point.
You wouldn't expect to see it at that point.
Nothing's impossible.
That could be some reasons why we're seeing those discrepancies in the numbers there. But that's something to keep in mind, is that the Mazda miles per kilowatt hour, I believe, is a little bit overestimating what it actually is, mathematically speaking.
And by the way, guys, this is a plug-in hybrid vehicle. Just to be clear about that, some people seem confused on our Prius Prime. Just because the battery is dead doesn't mean we're on the side of the road. There's still an engine. And it also doesn't mean that the engine is running all the time either. It's going to operate as a traditional hybrid once you have depleted the battery. So right now we are with the engine off here in the stop and go traffic. We can even accelerate up to, a low level of speed here and keep the engine off, because it does have a little bit of reserve in the battery that recharges as you brake and whatever.
And I do want to point out, if you use this button right here, that actually will go ahead and kick your gasoline motor on and kind of take it out of hybrid mode, and it will charge the battery pack. So you can set it to have a charge target if you want it to hit a certain amount of range or whatever. It will use the braking and the regen to go ahead and store energy back into the battery and actually give you a substantial amount of range. I drove around for about an hour and I got about 6 miles of range when I used that mode right there. So it is possible, even if you don't have a plug or whatever, to get yourself some range by using that charge mode. And guys, that's really where we're going to leave off on this range test video of the all-new 2024 Mazda CX-90. We're, of course, very excited that Mazda went ahead and electrified this new version of the CX-90 and really is giving you that level of efficiency, and we're very happy to see that it outperformed what the EPA was estimating. I know a lot of you guys are, saying, okay, well, what can you do really with 26 miles of range? Well, it actually, in our test, was about 31 miles of real-world range, and from owning a plug-in hybrid, which we do actually own a plug-in hybrid, I can tell you that a lot of the daily commuting and stuff can be completely electrified. And then you just go home, charge it a little bit. It only takes about 2 hours to charge this vehicle from dead to 100%. And that really is something that I think a lot of people can benefit from. So hopefully you found this video helpful in your purchasing decisions and maybe picking between a gas-powered Mazda CX-90 or this new plug-in hybrid that they're offering. And if you did find it helpful, please pay us back by hitting that subscribe button down below, because by subscribing you help get us these vehicles down to Lexington, Kentucky, so we can do a range test and have it for a full 7 days and get those real-world impressions for you all. But we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.